So the next workshop, January the 8th, all about Polish hops. And we have lots of other presentations coming up this year. What I'm going to do, first of all, is hand over to Andre, who's going to give a little bit of an introduction about EBCU. So over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Brett. First, just a reminder about the workshops that we have them all recorded here under EBCU's accounts, so on YouTube, so you can find all the presentations and workshops that we have had so far. So please watch them and as well like them. Stop sharing and then switch over sharing to the short introduction. Can you see now?
Yeah.
Good. So a short introduction about EBCU, the voice of the European beer consumers. So EBCU was founded in May 1990 by national beer consumer organizations in, I think, 4 different countries, if I remember correctly. Or was it 3? So UK, Belgium, Netherlands originally. And in 2008, the organization itself, we got a little bit more sort of like formal because we signed a constitution, which still is sort of like the, let's say, the founding ground of how we run EBCU today. And since 2019, we have a professional secretary via camera, our biggest member. And this year we were incorporated as not-for-profit international non-governmental organization, a very bureaucratic word, which suits us very fine because we're located in Brussels under Belgian law. So we even have a physical post address there. EBCU today, we have 19 member organizations all over Europe. Some say from Iceland to Italy, from Spain to Finland. And we represent over 180,000 beer consumers across these member countries. And our exec committee, currently it's me, then we have Hans-Peter from Denmark, Rianne from Netherlands, Chris from UK, and CCC from Bamberg, or he's still sort of like on the board, although he stepped down this autumn, but officially still a member. And our mission is to preserve and maintain diversity of traditional beer cultures, and that is one reason why we, for example, do these online workshops that we have. Then we also want to consumer to receive the best factual information about beers. So please visit our website, and from there you can click on beer styles, which is a totally new, well, not new, but it's a website we released this year about all the different types of beer styles that are brewed in Europe and also elsewhere in the world. And then also we work on protecting the consumer. It could be from taxation, it can be on beer labeling, anything that concerns the European beer consumer. And then other activities we do, what's called lobbying and giving feedback, usually for initiatives published by the European Commission. And this has become very sort of like, let's say, easier now as we're incorporated under Belgian law, which has made us into a real, so like a bigger player on this topic. But we also have a platform for our member organizations to share ideas, how to, for example, run beer festivals. Then we also endorse beer competitions, because there are big competitions out there that where you, let's say, so like buy the gold medals, but then there are real ones. So we also teach beer consumers about it. And as mentioned, we do the workshops and Beer Stars websites, and we also do a lot on beer and well-being. And then we also every year have an annual reception in Brussels at Brewers of Europe for invited guests, where we tell about our work. I guess that's all for a short introduction. So I'm going to stop sharing now and give over the word to tonight's guests, which are Christian Andersen and Jens Eiken.
Thank you.
Eiken. Yeah.
Thanks, Andre. I'm going to hand over to Christian. The one thing I would like to mention is, please, if you have any questions for the speakers or for the presenters, please use the chat facility. Please keep yourself muted. And I'll hand over to Christian and Jens.
Thank you, Brett. I can share. We have a little presentation also to support our, you can say, talk. So we'll take the questions as you say after the session. But please add to what we say, because I believe that some of you actually know a lot more or equally more than we do. My name is Jens, as you said, and I'm a master brewer since educated master brewer from the Scandinavian School of Brewing a long time ago. Been a master brewer at different breweries around the world. Royal Unibrew Denmark, Carlsberg, by 12 years in different functions. I worked at Molson Coors in UK, and then worked at multiple or a few enzyme suppliers to the enzyme industry. So, but I'm still, you can say, doing collabs. I'm working with different brewers to create recipes and to support how we brew, both in Denmark, where I live, but also internationally. So that's a little bit about my past, and I'm also trained, as you might, some of you here as well, trained beer taster. The next will be World Beer Cup in 2024 in Las Vegas, where I will join. And I normally join some of the conferences around the world, but that mainly on a professional level. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you, Brett, and European Beer Consumers Union for inviting us to talk about our passion, the naked beer passion. I'm an author, I'm a blogger, and I'm a journalist, skilled journalist. About 20 years or so, I have been communicating professionally about, I would close to say Pilsner. I have been communicating about beer. And my next book is the book about the Danish Beer Revolution. I guess it will be out next year, late next year. I'm a consultant for breweries. I develop beers for breweries. And that's about it. I'm a Pilsner lover, above all, but beer is my passion for a long time. I'm very much into giving language to the beer, and I'm very much, my vision is to raise the bar for the beer image, because then it will be much more fun to work in this area.
Thank you, Christian, as well. You can say that I think that we are all beer lovers sitting in this session here, I'm sure. What I actually normally do, like many others probably do, actually the first thing I do when I go into a bar or anywhere else, I taste their lager or their Pilsner to see if they're able to brew a beer. And that's also what we write a lot about in the book, which I'll come to in a second. So can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
So we are phrasing this a little bit, yet another year of the naked lager beer, we believe so, and we'll come to that conclusion. Just for you to know, we'll go through different sections of what we have done, Christian and I, with the book, for instance, but also our personal opinion about what's going on in the Pilsner lager area. So this, you can say, beer, golden beer with a nice white fluffy foam. This is two of us. I'll not dwell into that because we already did that. But today we'll talk a little bit about the beer revolution, from Paria to fame, you might say, about the Pilsner. It's much more stories about what's about Pilsners today than just 5-10 years ago. We'll talk a little bit about freshness and the culture behind, And then we have seen a little bit of a development in the last couple of years about taste. Is it type or what is it? And then a little bit of secrets about how to brew a good Pilsner. We'll go through that during the session today.
When we
So,
start,
Christian, a little bit about the book, I'm sure.
yes. When we started writing this book, it was as if everybody knew what a Pilsner was like. It was not very, you couldn't take it seriously. But the more you dig into this subject of the refined beer Pilsner, the more you find out how refined it is. I was very into beer also in the beginning of the beer revolution, and I have been also one of these radicalized beer enthusiasts, drinking beers with huge amounts of hops and extreme beers. But I came to a conclusion in my life as a beer enthusiast that my favorite kind of beer was light lagers and pilsners, but I couldn't actually get some fine ones, some fine pilsners when I went to the craft beer bars. So something had to be done, and so Pilsner was like a synonym with the industry, with the big brewers. So it was actually the Pilsner that the beer revolution is built upon. A revolution, a counter revolution, attacking the Pilsner or the craft brewers. They hadn't any interest in brewing my favorite kind of beer, a Pilsner. A good example is the godfather of craft beer here in Denmark, perhaps also in internationally, Mikkel Borg Bjergsø, the man behind Mikkeller beer brand. He opened his first of, I think he has 40 bars around the world today. He opened the first bar in Copenhagen in 2010, the Mikkeller bar, and when you wanted to go online, you have to have a password. And the password at that Mikkeller bar was, "I hate Carlsberg." And he could have written or mentioned, I hate Pilsner, because there was actually no Pilsner there. So something had to be done. So a public relations campaign has to be done. And this book is a part of the movement to tell the good story about this fine beer. And today, to my very not surprise, to my very joy, I can see when I visit Pilsner bars, when I buy beer from also very small craft beer brewers, today they have a Pilsner or light lager or some other kind of lagers in their among their beers. So the book, almost 400 pages, and the English book is out tomorrow, isn't it? Tomorrow, Jens?
Yeah.
Yes. 3 years ago it was in Danish, and tomorrow it's in English. Almost 400 pages. The core of the book is 3 research travels to the Pilsner loving and Pilsner perfectioning regions of the world. Czech Republic, of course, that's where it's from originally in 1842. I went to Franconia too, a part of Bavaria. They are not known for their Pilsners, but they make some of the best Pilsners in the world. And finally, Oregon, with the capital Portland. That was the third research area. It consists of, the book consists of interviews with the brewmasters, reviews of their beer, and it's also putting the Pilsner into different kinds of type. Again, to underline the importance of the language. There is around 20 types of Pilsner in the book, and I guess it's first time anybody has done that, putting it in type. Also an extensive description about flavors. We have counted 140 flavors of Pilsner. We have 10 recipes. We have an extensive description of how to brew a Pilsner, the raw materials. Also a lot about the culture among the Pilsner, the festivals, and how to pour a Pilsner. So I guess it's the first base beer about Pilsner, and yeah, that's a short description about the book. Tomorrow it's out in English. Jens?
Thank you, Christian. I think it's very exciting, but there's also like, what is the role of a lager in the first stage? And you can say that's probably not where you see a lager or where you should see a lager. This guy is in a craft beer temple in the middle of nowhere, in a desert, saying or asking this guy coming to the bar, let me guess, you would like an organic IPA smoothie hand brewed with spelt wheat and blueberries with extra sediment. That is not what we characterize as a Pilsner, and that's probably where it actually also is really, you can say, or should be around. This is what we drink when we are thirsty. This is actually what we enjoy after a work day. This is also what we enjoy with friends. I mean, I always go back to a Pilsner after tasting something else. I always start with a Pilsner. So, of course, it has a function in the beer categories we have around today. Should I think that's the main thing. And then it's like, I can go on with, okay, what do you actually believe a good Pilsner is? And I mean, I always, you can say, when I taste a kind of a Pilsner or lager, I always take a big sniff, a large sniff of the beer and say, okay, is the raw material okay? Has the yeast been actually behaving rightly? Was it a live yeast? How was the water? How was the hops? How was the process condition from the start to the end? And then I actually say, okay, there's a lot of harmony in this beer. And then I go to the next step and say, am I enjoying this one? And if not, I actually ask for having another one. So that's how I normally, you can say, start with a Pilsner and end with a Pilsner. But it's a lot to do with freshness. It's a lot to do with a refreshing, nice, clear liquid. With regards to all flavors, and you might think that when you have a Pilsner, what is the normal all flavors? And I believe that some of you already know, because it's a lot to do with the process. This is what I've been doing for many years. And of course, we all know that during the, you can say, the process, a lot of things can actually happen during the production of a lager. And that's where we should be very careful, and we should actually do this right. But you have all probably tasted Pilsners or lagers which were oxidized, meaning that the start of the life is really not the right. You get these cardboard flavors, so it tastes like cardboard. And that developed slowly to something completely different. But if we start with a cardboard flavor, this is where I stopped drinking. There's also like when you use raw materials which might not be of the right kind, you get this grainy off flavor. It depends on the process. So how do you actually strain, or how do you do the mass separation? Is that in control, or does it take too long? Then I can taste that immediately as a grainy flavor. Of course, if you use old hops, you have the cheesy flavor. We all know that. And of course, if you have a yeast which is not vital enough, you get and can get sulfuric flavors or sulfur flavors, like also drainy, rotten flavors, because the yeast is more or less dead. And then you can have these, of course, after packaging, you can get these skunky old flavors, which you should be careful about after. If you take your Pilsner out in the sunlight, we all know that's probably not the nicest flavor, but half of the people in the world like the skunky flavor, the other half do not. And of course, as a brewer, you probably would like to, you can say, not having the skunky flavor in the beer. That's a little bit about what can go wrong, Christian. And I'll probably just mention this, like what you have to master in production, which I also describe in the book, is that you have to be able to actually limit oxygen. You have to limit as much as you can heat loads, both in production but also in transport. Take care of the mashing process as short as possible. Also the filtration, the yeast should be vital. And then after packaging, keep your beer cold and dark. That's the essential one. And then of course in the production, it should be clean. Or else you can immediately see these flavors, or actually you will perceive these flavors in a lager or in the Pilsner. That's an immediate one, because it's what we describe in a book. It's like having a margherita pizza. You can taste if the tomatoes or the cheese is not the right, or if they are old. You can do that immediately. You can taste that immediately, just like in a Pilsner.
Jens, a lot of the brewmasters we have interviewed in the book, they say that it's the most difficult beer to brew. What do you think about that?
I think that's also why a lot of people did not brew a Pilsner from the start, because you need to have the skills, or learn the skills, be taught the skills about actually brewing, because all the raw materials are actually in your face immediately. There's nothing which can cover the taste, like hops. When you do box, when you do a very strong dark box, for instance, then of course you have the caramelic flavor and the other tones. If you do an IPA, it's mostly hoppy. If you do a wheat beer, it's a lot to do with phenolic or banana flavors. It all depends. But I think that when you have to do with a lager or Pilsner, which is, you can say, so naked, that's why we call it a naked beer. It's so naked because it's mostly the raw materials which are coming out immediately. So it's about having the right malt, or other adjuncts like maize, rice, could also be sorghum and other or raw materials. I mean, they should be fresh. It's just like having, when you go down to the grocery or the supermarket, I mean, you also take the right and the fresh raw materials before you start cooking. It's the same with the Pilsner. You should really be aware of the raw materials you use. You should be aware of the yeast you use. Of course, the yeast will also give you a kind of a flavor to your lager. And here, of course, you can choose different yeast, and we'll come back to the future of Pilsner. And we see some trends. We can talk about that later. And then, of course, the water content, the ionic content, so the chemical composition of the water is also important. And then, of course, which hop do you use? Should it be a Sopel like the Tettnang or Middelfrüh, or the Saaz from Czech? Or should it be American hops? Then you get a total different lager.
I tried to make some conclusions about the magic about the best Pilsner. How do you make it with raw materials? And somehow I think that the floor malts, they popped up several times when I talked to brewmasters. Not only the Czech brewmasters, they use floor malt. And one of the best pilsners I've tasted is the Troma Pils from Austria. And they use open fermentation. And open fermentation is also again and again mentioned by the best brewmasters. Decoction is also one of the features. Not only the Czech, the Czech brewmasters, but also some of the Germans and the American, they use decoction. And finally,
I comment on that one, Christian, because you know that is it infusion or is it decoction? When you boil part of the mash, you can say in the process, then of course you produce a lot of Maillard reactions.
Yeah.
And then you get more flavor like you have in the Czech beers. But of course, for flavor stability, it's not the best. And then we can go back to how long can a beer be fresh for? That's another point to just add on to this.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let me ask you again. The Pilsner Urquell, the first Pilsner in the world, they invented the Pilsner in 1842, as I told. I guess they are making decoction still 4 times decoction, but that doesn't match with what you're saying, isn't it? So they have to drink it fresh, unless it will turn out in some unexpected ways.
I mean, we all have our beliefs, and of course, it's also to do with the yeast and how much you can say sulfur dioxide you have in the beer. So how much is the beer protected before you bottle it, or you put it into a keg, or you put it into a cask, or whatever you do. Of course, there's a lot of dependency here. So of course, if you have a good, you can say start protection of your beer, so a good production, of course, it will actually be fresh for longer. And that's back to the photo here. I mean, this is a fresh beer. And that's, I think that we should really think about what is a fresh, or what do you want to sell? Do you want to sell a fresh Pilsner here, which is important, I think, for the you can say the renommee or the status of the lager, because we all sit and enjoy a lager somewhere in a pub or when you're in Czech Republic. This is all to do with you can say kind of tradition. You get a fresh beer and you enjoy it. If you get it in a bottle, it might differ a little bit.
When I tasted that beer from Unetchiki Pivovar, just north of Prague, when somebody asked me what was the best Pilsner in the world, I would point this Unetchiki Pivovar, and I asked the brewmaster about this diacetyl issue. Many beer drinkers, they think that that Czech Pilsner is equal with diacetyl. I don't think that, but surely Pilsner Urquell has diacetyl. But then I asked the brewmaster at Unetchiki what, perhaps a little bit provocative, because he answered that no, no Pilsner should have diacetyl at all. So he was not into diacetyl. So I think it's quite interesting. There's a rule of thumb out there among the Pilsner brewers. They say that they actually say that Czech beer, they can have a drop of diacetyl. I don't know the exact amount, but a Czech Pilsner can have a drop of diacetyl, and that's okay. But a German Pilsner, that's a no-go. The other way around, German Pilsner can have some sulfur flavors, but that's a no-go in a Czech Pilsner, no sulfur. That's two schools of thinking beer. The two,
and that's also why we define the mother and the father of the Pilsners to be either the Czech or the German.
Yeah.
So that's where we start the scaffolding. You can say if we need a scaffold here, if we need a structure or not, we can discuss that in a second. But I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
And who's the structure for?
Yes, who's the structure for? That could be a good discussion. But again, the two main types, Czech Pilsner and German Pilsner. And then you have North Italian Pilsner, mostly famous because of the Tipo Pils from Birrificio Italiano, close to the Como Sea lake. I could talk long about Pilsner types. You also have a North German Pilsner. That's a very, very dry and very, very bitter Pilsner and very, very crisp Pilsner. Or perhaps I should say it was because the most well-known North German Pilsner is the Jever Pilsner. But let me tell you a little anecdote about Jever and also Stella Artois. The industry, I call it industry Pilsner today. Jever, I think it was around 20 years ago, I'm not sure. They got a new managing director or a new marketing director, I don't know. But they were world famous for being state-of-the-art North German Pilsner. But somehow they thought, the new managing director, that they have to have even more consumers. So what do you do when to have more consumers? You lower down the bitterness. You lower down the international bitter units, and they did. They slashed it, so it's not that bitter anymore. I'm not exactly sure how bitter it was before it was slashed, but it was slashed indeed. I don't drink Jever that often anymore because of that. I had an interview with the former, he was a yeast professor at Leuven University, Delvaux, Freddy Delvaux, I think it's Freddy Delvaux or Philip Delvaux, son and father, both yeast professors. It was the father I talked to, Mr. Delvaux, a Belgian. Today he is the owner of the De Kroon brewery in Belgium. He was at Stella Artois for almost 20 years. When he came to Stella Artois as a his new job, the international bitter unit was around 30. When he left, it was only 20. So I mentioned this not to talk bad about Jever or Stella Artois. It's a common problem or common challenge for almost all industry Pilsner brewers, and I think it's a shame, and that's also because the bad image for the Pilsner. And some of these Pilsners, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is actually not a Pilsner today. They can write it as many times they will on the beers or on the marketing material, but it's actually not a Pilsner. My definition of a Pilsner is a rich character, and somehow it sums up the beer revolution, I think, giving the consumers a rich taste, not only fresh taste, but also a rich taste. It actually has, the good Pilsner has they are well hopped, not only bitterness, but also with the aromatic flavors, but most of all, they are balanced. They are underplaying with their features. Balanced, underplayed with the features, but still rich in character. Yep.
That's on your. That's how you see it, Christian. And we are not always. You can say one opinion here, because I mean Pilsner has, you can say, There's a lot of different kind of pilsners out there. One can be a low IBU or bitterness. One can be high. And of course, do you need to develop? I think that you need to, of course. And of course, a lot of the bigger breweries where I also work for, of course, it's like, what is happening out there? What does a consumer like? And that's, of course, the direction a lot of these breweries develop their new beers. But on another note, I would say that some of these pilsners, which are on the screen here, of course, they have also developed to what they are today, and some has not moved 1 inch with regards to bitterness and body, I would say. So of course it depends on what you want to do. I think that as you mentioned, the Jever Pils or Jever in the past, I actually also wrote to them when they changed the bitterness, and I got a T-shirt back. So that's a long time ago, because I was also a little bit surprised, but that's many years ago. So I would say there is also a kind of a time for and one Pilsner type, and a time where you actually want something else, which can be a Pilsner with more body, with more hops, with more bitterness, and so forth. So just mentioning the Moritz Fiege Pils from Bochum, you have the Distelhäuser. They got a gold medal in the recent European Star. I was in Nuremberg, so I took a photo of that one. And then Pilsner Urquell. So we're going from the German to the Czech. As you said, the Trüber Pils is amazing. It's always winning in competitions, I would say. It's a very refreshing beer. As you said, Christian, open fermentation, a lot to do with the process. Belgium beers here, they have a very nice % alcohol on the label. I don't know how they can get to that one every time, but that's always interesting. You have the Tipo Pils. The recipe is also in the book of the Tipo Pils, so you can go and actually see how it's brewed. And just to mention some of the others, like wet hopped Pilsner. You have the Sharps Pilsner. It's bottle conditioned. So of course, if you have, you can say bottle conditioned Pilsner, as we've seen many places, you have a very nice foam, dense foam in the beer. So there's something to do, which we also write in the book, about pressure, about foam. And then you have Mikla with the collaboration with Botvar. You can say, do we say yet another year of the lager? Yes, we do. And then you have a recent launch of low alcohol beers from Japan, the super dry Asahi Dry Crystal. I think that's also an answer to what is happening. Like we have in Sweden, Folköl, we have a low alcohol beers for that occasion, or that depends on when you drink that. And then you have just an example of a lower alcohol beer, 0.4%, or could also be 0.0. The Brooklyn Special Effect. Why do we put that on? Because it's a bit not like a normal 0.0 or normal 0.5. It's a bit more hoppy with a bit more character.
Around 90% of all beers sold in the world is of the light lagers or the Pilsner types. So that's also not an uninteresting issue about when you dig into this special kind of beer. The culture is also very interesting, and it can change the whole beer market, how you enjoy beer. If you take a look at the ever more popular tank pop or tankovna, the Czech the fresh beer system with the tanks, the fresh beer is sometimes it only is hours ago they left from the brewery. In London and other cities, they are adapting this way of thinking, freshness, tank beer freshness and somehow the Pilsner, or not somehow, the Pilsner type is leading this development in the beer culture, and I think it's wonderful to have more freshness out there, and perhaps this way could lead freshness to other types of beer, pale ale or whatever you like. I would like that. Up until now, the signature beer of the beer revolution is, by no doubt, India Pale Ale, whatever it is. It has influenced many types of beer, also the Pilsner types. Pilsner brands have been, lots of hops, lots of aromatic hops, so they resemble IPAs a little bit. So now I can think, I would wish that the Pilsner world, the Tankovna fresh beer thinking will perhaps influence other beer types, other way of enjoying beer.
I believe also that you will see much more freshness. I mean, you've seen what's happening in Japan, for instance, the coal supply chain from Asahi in the past. It started that the beer should be, I think, was max 9 days from production to the consumer. So of course we know, of course, that if you transport cold, you keep the freshness much longer.
Perhaps
also an expensive one.
One of the most interesting projects in Denmark is a brewery called Bad Seed. They have a they have a passion for lager beers, not the least the Pilsner. They have a project called Brewing, and they have a deal with I think it's 15 craft beer bars in Denmark. They get this beer within 48 hours. That's their, and I think it's simple thinking, but it's when it's done that way, it's just marvelous to have a fresh beer. And I think, please, other breweries, please just follow in their successful lane. I think I cannot recommend it warmly enough, the Braufisch concept. And it's so linked to Pilsner beer.
Let's see here. If we go to the scaffolding, we talked about before, this is just some examples of, you can say, what is actually happening around in the world. This is just an example from Sweden. It's a brewery called Omaka, and owned by Spendrups, as I believe. Anyway, I think it's really interesting to see they don't say IPA, they don't say wheat, or of course depends on which beer it is, but they don't state the type first. They actually just state a kind of a flavor, so dry and taste, so aroma and taste, so dry, bitter, crispy. Then you get the mother. If you take the fresh beer straight from the tank, that's one. So the Aphrodite, hot, sensual, aphrodisiac. You have the cold soups, acidic, herbaceous, and mineral. Probably something to do with herbal hops, but something from maybe Germany. Of course, the lager is mentioned as a real super lager, but a lot of them I actually mention like, here's the taste, not the type. So from a master brewer's or brewer's perspective, I mean, we normally have the scaffold. So we say, if we need to do a lager or a Pilsner, we use a bottom fermented yeast. That's what we need to do. And then the rest is more or less up to you. But depending on, of course, where you are in the world, with regards to an ale, you use an ale yeast or top fermenting yeast. But we have seen a lot of development around in the world, and we have a recipe in the book as well about using an ale to produce a Pilsner or lager, an ale yeast to produce a lager. And we have actually seen that some ale brewers around the world, they start to produce lagers, but using the ale yeast. And why could that be? Well, you have a more fruity flavor, and you have a very fast production. So there are some pro and cons definitely on this one. Another one is, I just wanted to mention this one that's from Tsingtao. It's a Pilsner beer coconut latte flavored ice cream in this little box here. And then from Sweden, you have this one. Not to mention anything about the label as such, but it says here an ice creamification of a Pilsner, an attempt to bend your mind, brewed with mango, milk, sugar, and our favorite hops. So a little back to you, Christian, from the start of the beer revolution, that you put everything in the beer and then you call it tiramisu stout or whatever you do. I hope we're not in that direction yet on the Pilsner, but I think it's important just to say a little bit about what's happening out there in the world.
One of the people interviewed in the book, they say that the beer revolution is so mature that they are matured, they are ready to appreciate the fine Pilsner. And I think that's a part of the reason why it's so popular these days. I said popular because I actually think when you get into a craft beer bar today, you can expect to have at least one Pilsner from Fass. Just 3 or 4 years ago, that was almost unthinkable.
Exactly.
And I think Pilsner is of course, as we all know, a lager beer, or the lager type, but Pilsner has broken the, what do you call it, they had changed the picture of lager beers. So I think we can expect more lager beers coming, and I hope and I actually expect to see more bock beer. I wrote an article for the Danish Beer Enthusiasts member magazine, where I called the bock beer the IPA of the lager beers. It has so much to offer out there, so I think and I hope more bocks. Also, you can start with the light bocks. It is coming. I think it is coming. The dark lagers also is coming. And if you can look at the German Pilsners and the Czech Pilsners, I think the Czech Pilsners are coming more and more. And I'm very glad.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can actually see some of them in the book. Not to mention, especially the recipe as such, but we have 10 recipes in the book, and some of them are you can say well known, as you can maybe see from the titles here, and some of them are actually composed and already brewed by brewers around, like the Brit Pilsner. The Naked Gold is a Dortmund like. We have the number 9, the Pilsner, what we call that's our, you can say, translation of the Czech Pilsner as such.
The first one.
It's the first one we brewed together, yeah.
No, it's a translation of the first ever made.
True.
Yeah.
So a lot of good things I think we have in the book, Christian, which we read together, and at least I believe that you have a little thing about the future. What do you think of the future of Pilsner lagers, as you mentioned a little bit?
Yeah, I haven't mentioned enough. I think it's coming, and it's not just a fancy. It's a longevity. It's a long.
Exactly.
Exactly, I think. But I became so again and again. I was happy when I made research for the book, and one of the simple things that made me happy is that I asked several brewmasters, and they said to me, at the end of the day, Christian, after brewing stouts and IPAs and whatever, I drink a Pilsner because that's my base beer. So
Exactly.
Let's have the brewmasters have the last words with that invention.
And I also believe that the future will be very bright. And I think that now I read the book so many times. So I read all your interviews, Christian, and I think they were all saying that Pilsner is coming back.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got some questions for you. The contributors have put some questions. So are you happy for me to read those out and maybe you take them both?
Please.
Okay, so let's start then. First question, is there any particular or favorite yeast when brewing a Pils? Now, this person has asked for a German Pils, but maybe you could include a Czech Pils as well.
Jens?
I take that one, Christian.
Please.
I think I mean it depends on the brewery. If you look at the yeast bank, of course, there's multiple you can say strains out there. We all know the Weihenstephan WS or W3470. I think that's the standard yeast, which is a very nice workhorse. It's actually giving a nice flavor together with the hops you use for German, Czech Pilsners. Of course, you have different yeast banks around the world, like White Labs. I can also mention Dömens. I can mention many others. I made some lagers with a yeast called 2155 from Alfred Jørgensen, the old Alfred Jørgensen brewery supplier. Very nice combination with SARS hops. You get a very nice or immense, you can say, flavor combination, like jasmine flavor. So it depends on what you want. But I mean, if you want to start making a lager, I would always go for the Weihenstephan 3470 as a starter.
Okay, thank you. Question from Diego. Talking about, is fermentation better under pressure? And suggesting maybe the lagering time will be less in this case, or do you recommend long lagering?
Whoa, that's a yeah, interesting one, because it's you can go from one end to the other. I've brewed when I was in my first brewery, it was all pressure fermentation, and it was a fast process. And it produced a very nice lager with less flavor as such. So this, so I would probably answer this one and say it depends on what you want to accomplish. Because if we say that taste is key, and if you don't have any, you can say, process time conditions or issues, I would probably today I would go for an open fermentation and a very live, you can say. No pressure on my fermenter, and then do the pressurization on the maturation vessel, actually. So having two vessels, if I should dream about what I would do, that's what I would do.
Okay. The next question is from Ante. How important is the freshness of the hops when making Pilsner?
A lot of production questions. I would say that it depends on how they're stored, the hops. But if you take, you can say you can do, if you do wet hops or fresh hops, depends on the way and what you want to accomplish. But I would say that for a Pilsner, I would take something which is definitely below 1 year. So try to keep the harvest season and use fresh hops for Pilsner.
Okay. Question from Matthew. What about talking about diacetyl? We've got a couple of questions about diacetyl. You mentioned it earlier in your presentation. So is there a big difference between the Czech and non-Czech Pilsner? Is it linked to practice only? And i.e. diacetyl rest, if that makes sense to you? Or is it the choice of ingredients, i.e. yeast with a bigger propension to create diacetyl? These are very technical questions. I'm just reading. I'm just reading them out. I'm glad that I don't have to understand them. So over to you.
I mean, I will try to do this short. I mean, when you talk about Czech Pilsner, they have a definition they have a what do you call this again? The not the IP rights, but they have a special way of producing Czech Pilsner with Czech malt, so minimum 80% Czech malt, and they should use their local Czech hops and so forth. But I think there is a tendency, as also Christian alluded to maybe let the yeast excrete a little more diacetyl, but that's only a little bit for some of the Czech Pilsners, and that could be the floor malting plus the hops, plus the yeast coming together and giving you that nicely, you can say nice mouthfeel of that beer. So I think that's a combination. Back to practice and back to whatever you want to accomplish, but I think there's a lot of combinations here.
Okay.
People like the diacetyl in general, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the
when I
diacetyl.
go out drinking beer with my friends and I have a beer with diacetyl that was not going to have diacetyl, my friends they just love it. So it appeals somehow in general to the taste buds.
I remember.
But it depends on who's drinking. Sorry, Brett. Depends on who's drinking. I don't like diacetyl as such, but sometimes when you get a combination of a mouthfeel and the hop used, it could be a Polish hop like Marinka or whatever you use. I mean, you have a tendency. Is it hop aroma, or is it a little bit of diacetyl? There's also a lot of thoughts here.
Okay, I was going to ask. We'll move on. Maturation, which is best? Maybe a quick answer to this: vertical, horizontal, or old school barrels? In which case, what wood?
It's back to you, Christian. The wood aged or wood matured lager.
I have also asked this question to the brewmasters, and there's no definite answer.
I have an opinion, but
the answer could be that if it's in a small volume, it could have an advantage to have it horizontal lagering, maturing in horizontal vats. But if it's in big amounts, no problem.
Okay, another technical question: why do we make diacetyl rest at high temperature of fermentation to clean the beer, but we don't make the same with sulfur, with lager yeast at high temperature? I don't know if that.
It depends on the yeast as well, but normally, if it depends on the fermentation temperature, you normally increase in the end to actually get diacetyl away quicker. That's the whole reason, because the warmer the temperature, the quicker it disappears. But it should also be a good yeast. So it all depends, and then you also have the oxygen levels. So high oxygen or low oxygen level when you start fermentation will also have an impact on the sulfur content.
Okay. And I'm going to move on now. Is Pilsner always brewed with barley malt, or are other grains such as wheat used to good effect? That's from Stephen.
I mean, there's just been a beer launched with 100% wheat malt as a lager. If you look around the world, you will see all sorts of raw materials being used. Africa, sorghum, cassava, corn, maize, US, maize, rice, Asia, maize, rice. Europe, we had tendency to use more barley, so raw barley, normal barley malt, but also wheat. So it depends. So you can use a wide selection of raw materials to create your Pilsner.
Yeah, but it's industry Pilsner, isn't it, Jens? We're talking about here. But if you
not necessarily. I would say no. It depends on also the local tradition and the taste you want. If you talk about Czech and of course German lagers, you have a tendency to use 100% barley. If you look at everything else, I mean, you know that when you use corn, you have maybe a little bit more body, a little bit more fresh, like with rice. So it all depends what you want to accomplish.
There's a comment from Matthew about Czech practice and bitterness levels, and he's saying that Ferdinand Pivovar has got 25 to 40 IBUs. I think he's making the comment there's a lot of variety in the bitterness levels.
True.
Okay.
That's it goes from 15 maybe down to 7 in US, 7 IBUs to about 45 IBUs normally, from a light Pilsner or lager to a Czech lager.
And a challenge really, maybe, this is from Andre, saying you talked about German and Czech pills, but his suggestion is maybe you should separate North German pills from South German pills, because they're always put together. But South German pills seem to have more in common with Czech pills than North German pills.
We do separate them in the book.
Yeah, true.
Okay, agreement there. Good.
And I agree.
Yeah, okay, good. Is West
now I need to get the book, definitely.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that I was unsure about. So, super, thanks.
And is West Coast Pilsner a style or a gimmick? You don't have to answer that if you feel it incriminate you or
no. It's West Coast is United States, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could say it's a style. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it incorporates the new the craft beer revolution thinking that if it's IPA or if it's lots of hops and lots of the aromatic components from hops, then it's a good thing. And then you have a beer style Pilsner, and you use these thinking on the beer. So it's a style. You can also call it a new modern Pilsner. Yeah, craft Pilsner.
Yeah, craft Pilsner. Okay, next one. So this one is in two parts. Is there a relationship between some of the Pilsen parameters, IBUs, and the lagering maturation length? And is explain the question. For example, the more IBU, the longer the lagering time.
I would say, I mean, if you take some of the new articles being published about lagering, I mean, some say it doesn't matter. I would say, I mean, Charlie Bamford, who you might know, says he advocates nothing is happening during maturation. I would say that for IBUs, the longer you mature, there is a tendency to get, you can say, less IBU. Some of the components, bitter components, is actually precipitating. It's the same happening with aged beer, that you get this sweeter or less bitter beers. But you also have this mellow effect and more rounded effect. So it depends on what time we're talking about. If it's 1 week or is it 6 months, it depends.
Okay. Question.
Can I have a small comment about the maturation time? Just a small one, because this is discussion, often a discussion. How long shall it maturate? The good brews, the brewmasters in general, they say around 40 days. The industry, they make a beer in a week. Budvar, they have 90 days maturation time. So it's, I think when some breweries, they say, we also have 90 days maturation time, I think it's marketing. It's not necessary. Okay, question from Michael. In the pantheon of Pilsner beer,
where do Krombacher and Warsteiner sit? In other words, I think he's asking, yeah, well, where you haven't got to answer that. If you feel it would incriminate you, you don't have to answer, but the question's there.
They are not
You
at the
take
top
one
of the
question.
league.
It's maybe better that you answer that one.
Yeah, it's not the top of the league, but it's the middle of the road, I think. But the middle of the road in Germany it's quite a good place to be. But I wouldn't mind drinking them. But yeah, they are not top of the league, but not in the bottom.
If you're in a bar and that's all that's available, you're not going to be disappointed.
No, but my blood will not flow wildly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on then. What's your opinion of Pilsners, or so-called Pilsners, that have been fermented with Kvik yeast strains? Can you still call those Pilsners?
What was the first two words you said there? What was the...
What's your opinion of so-called Pilsners that have been fermented with Kvik yeast strains?
Well, that's also what we alluded to during the session, is that we see a lot of development. So who decides what the scaffold should be? Is a lager defined by using a bottom fermenting yeast? That's the brewers. That's us saying that. What we see there is a kind of a there's something happening in the beer market where you can say it's more flavor or more what would I like to give the consumer, because if you go to the taste instead of the type, then all this there are no rules. So I think that's up to you, but personally I would always use a bottom fermenting yeast to produce a lager.
Yeah, people like definitions, don't they? And I suppose this leads up for the next question for Ollie, who said there are many unorthodox lager types now. Are there any absolute no-nos in the Pilsner world? Is there anything that you say is definitely not acceptable?
Should I start, Christian, and then you can end? I think, I mean, basically, if you go to certain countries, there are definitions to how you can brew beer. I think we should start there. And then if you have a kind of, if we don't say taste, but if we actually go for the type, I would keep it, when we talk about Pilsner, I would keep it to the normal. So raw materials like cereal, it could be whatever cereal in my mind. But then you have the hops and the right yeast. So I would say, what is a no-go? I mean, it depends on what you want, but then you don't create a Pilsner, I would say.
A good Pilsner has no noise.
It's naked and fresh.
It's naked and it's fresh and it's underplayed, but still has richness, has a rich character.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same, that sometimes I want a drink that's not too complicated, because I can have plenty of those sorts of drinks. And I think one of you said it's a beer I have at the, I think it's you, Christian, said it's a beer I have at the start and at the end, and that's my feelings. Well, that's my feelings. There's a
good expression. I like it.
Sorry, non-technical person, but okay. Last two questions. This is from Klaus. From what he knows, you should be able to ferment a lager at a higher temperature if you ferment under pressure. But I find it hard to find evidence for that assertion. So which strains, asking what yeast strains, what maximum temperature, what maximum pressure, etc., etc. Does that make sense?
I mean, I can give you a hint. There are a lot of articles in the old days about pressure fermentation, but what I used was, you can say, around 1.5 bar. I used about 16 degrees Celsius. So if you go to that detail, then you have, and then you slowly, when you are more or less done with the fermentation, you go to maturation. And then release the pressure, of course, but that's how we did it, and it was quite good.
Okay, and the last question, again, another technical question, but hey, that's the way it goes. Is DMS a problem with Pils malts because they normally have a longer boil?
Okay, that's a tricky one because you know that Pilsner malt, if that's the question, or is it lager? Because Pilsner malt is produced in a malt house, and there, of course, you have the kilning temperature or drying temperature, and then you have a level you have to go up to get rid of DMS or the precursors. Then in wet boiling, if that's the case, then of course you have to take care of the precursors to DMS. And then if you boil enough, you might say, then you get rid of the DMS and the enough of the precursors. So it is a split answer here, but there's it depends on where you are in the world. Some beers, as you know, do contain DMS. Some do not. And that's back to the process, actually.
That seems a good point to finish, and it's just coming up to past. So that's a good time. Thank you, Jens. Thank you, Christian. It's been brilliant. And I think we've had lots of questions. Obviously, people are interested in this. And good luck with the book sales. Good luck on the launch of the new book. And thank you very much for tonight's presentation. And it's been fantastic. And to everyone else, to remind you, January the 8th, we've got a talk from Michael Kopik about Polish hops. So I hope you'll join us for that. Please sign up on the EBCU website. This presentation, if you only caught a little bit of it, will be recorded and will be available on YouTube. But otherwise, thank you to Jens, thank you to Christian, and I hope to see you both soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.